Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk KFYO. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Joining us to talk a little statewide news. There's a lot going on in the great state of Texas when it comes to politics. Our good friend, editor of the Quorum Report, Scott Braddock. Good morning, Scott. How are you today?
Good morning, Chad. I'm great. How are you?
Doing great. Appreciate you joining us today, my friend.
Absolutely. It's my Monday morning tradition now. I've had plenty of coffee. I'm ready to go.
Excellent. Well, we've got a big week ahead of us. It was announced this morning in his newsletter. Michael Quinn Sullivan of Empower Texans will be releasing the audio tomorrow morning, sometime between, let's just say, 9 and 10 a.m. He'll be releasing the audio of that secretly recorded meeting between himself, Speaker Bonnen, and Representative Dustin Burrows.
It's all coming to a head, apparently, Chad, and there's a lot to think about with this announcement. As you said, Sullivan says the audio is going to be released on their website around 9 o'clock, something like that. And at the same time, and this has me scratching my head a little bit, just asking a question. I'm not asserting anything or accusing anybody of anything, but this is worth asking, right? Sullivan says he's going to play clips, or they will play clips of the audio on WBAP radio in Dallas-Fort Worth tomorrow morning around 9:15. And, you know, when you're lining up a radio show, you're going to play clips of something, you kind of have to have that in advance, right?
Yeah.
You kind of have to have that lined up. So I wonder if there is a certain level of collaboration here between Sullivan and Chris Salcedo, who hosts the show. And Chris, by the way, a friend of mine, we used to work together at CBS in Dallas years ago. But Chris also has a show that airs on the radio station owned by Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick down in Houston. So I wonder if there's any collaboration going on there. It's just a question, just throwing that out there. Of course, Patrick has said the audio should come out, right?
Yeah.
So we'll keep an eye on that. The other thing I wonder is whether or not this is more of a defensive move by Empower Texans than anything else. The reason I ask that is because, you know, there's been lots of speculation. You've seen columns and people on the radio and elsewhere talking about the idea that this will cause chaos at the Republican caucus meeting later this week, which is coming up here in Austin. The Republican caucus, more than 80 members all come to Austin to play golf and drink and, gossip and carry on. That's, and Democrats do a version of that too, by the way. It's just, good social time to get together and then look at any business that might be in front of the caucus. And of course, this question about the speaker is going to be, talked about a lot. And the release of the audio, as has been speculated, could cause, the whole thing to seem more like a funeral than a pep rally. Just depending on what's on that audio. But there is also a lawsuit that has been filed, lest anybody forget, by the Texas Democratic Party, seeking not just the release of this audio. And I think this is important, Chad. And this is why I say it may be a defensive move. They're releasing the audio around 9 o'clock, as you said. There is a court hearing tomorrow at 2 o'clock here in Austin, where the Democratic Party is going to argue to release the audio, which apparently will have already been done, but also they're asking for any other audio that Sullivan may have of Bonnen and or Burrows. So that's one thing. And they're also looking for any communications from Empower Texans related to this meeting that was had on June 12th. Now, I can imagine that if they release the audio in the morning, Chad, and they go into court in the afternoon at 2, the Empower Texans attorneys will probably say, well, Judge, why are we even here? We've already released the audio.
Right.
But that shouldn't let them off the hook for those other things, whether they have other audio of the speaker and whether they have communications, text messages, emails, anything like that speak to exactly what Empower Texans was planning to do in relation to the meeting that was had on June 12th, or maybe any communications with the Speaker's office about that maybe we haven't seen just yet. So, releasing the audio may be entertaining. And by the way, interesting, Sullivan.
I thought it wasn't supposed to be entertaining.
Right, but he's going on what he describes as a popular radio show in Dallas-Fort Worth to talk about it and play clips about it.
He's going on Mark Davis's show?
Salcedo, that's the one.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
He says popular. I'd have to check.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
Well,
I'm sure
it's
it's fine.
It's
Sure.
a big stick, as you know. You grew up in Dallas-Fort Worth. But look, not about entertainment, but the entertainment aside, I don't think, and, forget about the partisanship. By the way, they're bringing in a visiting judge here in Travis County so that people can't say this was decided by some liberal Democratic judge in Travis County, which is often the accusation anytime it's so political. You have the Democratic Party suing a group that says they're Republicans. I question that. I think they're mercenaries. But anyway, the bottom line is there should be transparency here. I think you've said that, and other people have said that. And if they have any other communications to reveal, then hopefully it'll come out in due course, maybe as part of this lawsuit. Of course, I'll plan to be there in the courtroom, smiling and watching everything unfold.
Yeah. All right. Well, that'll be interesting to watch as we go through and see how all this plays out. Meanwhile, we've got Beto O'Rourke. He's out there making news, Scott, and not so much in a good way.
Not for him, anyway. He has been trying to fundraise, and as you asked the question over and over again, others were asking as well, where are Beto's numbers? Why wouldn't he release his fundraising haul for this past quarter? He finally did, and his numbers were better than they have been, at least they had been in the previous quarter when he raised about $3.6 million. He raised $4.5 million for the recently concluded quarter, Q3, but that's still well behind, folks like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, et cetera, who, have been raising more like $24 million. And as you talked about last week, I think, Pete Buttigieg raised, almost $20 million, and you had even Andrew Yang raising about $10 million. So the wind seems to be out of his sails. And interesting, this is somebody who was a prolific fundraiser when he was running for Senate. His fundraising just eclipsed anything we have seen from a Texas Democrat in the past, and of course ended up causing that Senate race against Cruz to be the most expensive U.S. Senate race in history. And a lot of his donations, of course, were coming from within Texas, but there were a lot of people who were donating to him outside of Texas for that Senate race. There was a lot of small donors who were kicking in. Now, part of that may have been they just didn't like Senator Cruz, and but others, have said, look, this Beto momentum, this wave of Beto support in 2018, just nothing like that has materialized now that he's running for the White House, and there are a lot of questions about the direction of this campaign. What worked for Beto in 2018, and mainly, shooting from the hip and just saying whatever, not having a script and not having consultants and pollsters and all that, seemed to work for him then. But now I think, maybe he may be sort of regretting that. He's regretting that he tried to approach the White House, bid in the same way, trying to guess where the national Democratic electorate is. And isn't it interesting, Chad? There's a huge disconnect between what we see on Twitter, and this is true on the right, by the way, too. What we see on Twitter and what we see on, social media, the blogosphere and all that, it's very different from what average Republicans and Democrats think about various issues. A lot of times when these Democrats go to these town halls, like you were talking about the pronoun question at the equality town hall that CNN had last week. The far left liberal comments that come from people like Beto about taking away the tax exempt status for churches and mosques, et cetera, if they don't agree with same-sex marriage. That may be what the Twitter sphere wants to hear, but the average Democrats don't seem to be buying that. If you look at the polls, it's still that, guys like Biden is still riding high, even though Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, are right there. And then Elizabeth Warren surpassing Biden in at least one poll this past couple weeks. But, for mainstream Democrats, just average folks out there, they're not as far left as some would say, just crazy, as what you see on Twitter and on social media. Well, and so Beto's been trying to find that that way to appeal to that far left, but it's not the real world.
Well, okay, and Scott, it seems to me, and again, I don't know the inner workings of the Beto campaign, but it seems like to me they're putting all their chips on winning Texas, or at least coming in second in Texas, because that might be able to keep him alive in the Democrat primary, or maybe keep him alive in talks of a VP nod. Texas Democrats, now I haven't seen this polled, but are Texas Democrats in favor of taking away people's AR-15s and in favor of taking away the tax exempt status of churches that don't embrace gay marriage?
I have not seen any polling to suggest that, and if you look at the debates that play out about around these issues at the Texas legislature. The elected representatives who are sent to Austin, from Democratic districts don't think that. I mean, every time there's a gun debate at the Texas Capitol, one of the first things you hear from Democrats is, I own guns. I own lots of guns.
Right.
And they go on to make their argument. Right.
Yeah.
So, and in fact, there's one Democrat from South Texas who often claims, I believe factually, he owns more guns than any Republican in the Texas legislature. And so, that's not where the Texas Democratic electorate is. And I think you're right. I mean, he wants to be the Texas candidate. I mean, look at the way that Beto did his original rollout of his bid for the White House, where he sort of had already announced and then did a kickoff rally, a series of kickoff rallies later in Texas. Wasn't really a kickoff. It was just more to assert that he's the Texas candidate. And, don't underestimate how important Texas is going to be in this nominating contest. It comes on the very same day as the primary in California. That was sort of engineered by Kamala Harris, the senator from California, who's making a big play for delegates from Texas. She's been campaigning a lot in Harris County and Dallas County, wants to, kind of sweep her home state of California and then, rack up some delegates in Texas as well. But you have Castro and Beto trying to fight it out to be the Texas person, and right now, Beto really flailing.
Scott, I want to get into, before I let you go, Senator Cruz. And again, I don't know if your eyebrows do the same thing that I do whenever he it's not like he goes after Trump, but he says things that are kind of out of line with what a lot of people would think he would say. Because he does support the president. They've made amends after the 26 election, but the senator said over the weekend that yes, it is wrong for Trump to seek China to look into the Bidens, and it made my eyebrows raise just a little bit, because this is not the first time that Cruz has criticized President Trump in recent weeks.
Yeah, Cruz had also said earlier that it was absolutely appropriate to investigate the call between the president and the president of Ukraine. He had said that the Democrats probably don't know how to be fair about that. He said their minds are already made up, but he's basically not, touting the party line, on a lot of these things, whereas the senior senator from Texas, John Cornyn, pretty much is doing that. You certainly don't see any comments like that from Cornyn, right? And, of course, I think the big difference should be obvious to everybody. It's plain as the nose on your face. Is Cornyn's on the ballot next year and Cruz is not, and, he's liberated. He just won re-election last year. He has a 6-year term. He can say whatever he would like, and I think there are some cracks in the dam. In this interview over the weekend on Face the Nation, you had Cruz simply say it's not appropriate for other countries to be, intervening in United States elections, and it should be people in the U.S. who make these decisions. And when he was asked specifically about asking China to intervene, on the president's part, he said, of course it is not appropriate. So I think Cruz is interesting to watch here. It may not even be that he's positioning for another bid for the White House, even though he has said that he's interested in that, Chad, as you know. But it may be just that he's sort of free to say what he thinks. He's not up for election.
Again, I don't know, but it would not surprise me if Cruz is playing the long game here. He's a good politician. He's a smart guy, and politicians like to play the long game. We both know that.
Well, when they have a term that lasts for 6 years and just one re-election, it's even easier to play the long game. You're right.
Yes, it is. Scott, tell folks what they can find at Quorum Report today.
We got a complete rundown of what's going on with this lawsuit in the Empower Texans, scandal with the Speaker of the House. Just posting that here in a few minutes at quorumreport.com, and of course we'll keep you up to date with what's happening in your state government. You can sign up for our free emails there at quorumreport.com. All
right, Scott, as always, appreciate your time.
Thanks, Chad. Talk soon.
That's Scott Braddock, editor, Quorum Report.